The high-stakes Trump-Putin meeting concluded in Alaska with no significant breakthrough toward peace in Ukraine. Now, the meeting was followed by a joint press conference, but neither leader took questions from the media. Trump and Putin addressed the press, where the two leaders underlined the need to secure peace in Ukraine. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin reiterated Russia's red lines. Putin emphasized that the root causes of the conflict must be eliminated and all of Russia's concerns must be taken into account.
We're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that.
Now, Putin red-flagged possible attempts by Europe and Ukraine to sabotage peace talks and added that he hoped there would be no backroom dealings or provocations by either to derail the talks.
I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress.
U.S. President Donald Trump said that the meeting with Putin was highly productive and several points were agreed to by Putin, but a few are left out. He also said that he would call up NATO and Zelensky, and ultimately it's up to them to agree.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting.
The press conference came after nearly 3 hours of talks between the two sides. However, the meeting was not a one-on-one meet as was planned earlier. It was instead a 3-on-3 meeting with Trump joined by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, while Putin was joined by his aide Yuri Ushakov and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. With no summit deal reached with Putin over ending the war in Ukraine, WION spoke with analysts to weigh in on what they make of the Alaska summit, and this is what they had to say. Listen in.
Well, certainly the Ukrainians were sending a message to the Kremlin that nothing is out of bounds. They were able to hit these airfields, some of them more than 2,000 miles away, obviously with help from inside Russia. And many of the aircraft that were destroyed were strategic bombers that the Russians cannot replace. These are old bombers. Bear bombers are very old. The backfire bombers are from the 1970s. The Blackjacks are from the 1980s. We're talking about very old strategic bombers that cannot be replaced. Now, Kiev knew very well that there was going to be massive retaliation on the part of the Russians, and Mr. Putin pretty much told that to President Trump. But the one thing that holds the Russians back is that if they would respond with a nuclear response, that would trigger something that they don't know whether they could control, number one. Number two, depending on where the strike hits, there would be blowback inside Russia. And number three, Mr. Trump is known to react exceedingly strongly when he sees children killed. That's why he already called Putin crazy. We don't know, and Putin doesn't know, how Trump would respond to a nuclear attack. And so even though the Russians have been threatening this pretty much for 2 years, it hasn't happened. Kiev knew very well that they would be struck. That's not a surprise at all. But I think they took that into account.
I think that it was great that the meeting occurred. were a lot of people who tried to sabotage it, who were hoping and praying that it was going to be a failure. Uh, and clearly, the signal that it had been a failure would be Trump addressing the press by himself. Well, that didn't happen. So it was not a failure in that way. However, there were no details. They talked about agreeing on so many topics, and the only thing that we heard any agreement on was that if Trump had been president in 2022 instead of Biden, that it wouldn't have started in the first place. So they said they had agreements. They said it was friendly. They seemed friendly. They talked a little bit about potential economic deals. They didn't hardly spoke at all about a ceasefire or peace in the war. So, Trump is going to have his phone conversations now with the heads of NATO and the coalition of the willing and others. Maybe something will come out of that, but we did not get any substance whatsoever.
It's evident that they did not achieve a breakthrough, which was somewhat predictable. Prior to the meeting, we saw a lot of speculation, open sources indicating that President Zelensky is not going to agree on land swapping. There's a territorial integrity issue here where Putin still views Ukraine as his territory, especially eastern Ukraine. And at the same time, President Zelensky feels exactly the opposite. So going into the meeting, you saw there was a lack of consensus. And so everybody was betting on the power of the presidency, the American presidency, as far as achieving some sort of ceasefire. But evidently, there was very slow movement or no movement in terms of achieving the ceasefire. But what I saw beyond that is that I felt that the trade and investment potential deal was more of a priority than achieving the ceasefire. So Putin mentioned that I want to do more business with the United States, especially looking at trade and investment. And he even went more specific about what kind of domains he wants to invest in with the United States, which was cut off after 2023.